This is why your wine costs what it does when everything is done by hand, the way it ought to be done. It was pretty cold here this morning, wasn't it?
Yeah, coming in I think it was like 14 degrees.
14?
Yeah.
So you've got 50 acres here.
Yep.
16 plus acres of grapes, right? But it's pretty spread out. You must have microclimates. You must get a range in temperature.
Even from the top part of our hill to the bottom part, I'd say we have an average of about 2.5 degree difference. So that's enough difference where we have to plant cold hardy varieties lower and some less sensitive stuff up top.
Wow.
But it definitely changes. And during the summer too, you get different, colder at night and all that kind of stuff.
What's the bottom line temperature where you start to get really nervous?
Anything below zero.
Anything below zero.
Definitely losing sleep after that. So we've had a couple of those nights this winter, but it depends on a lot of other factors, and you never know the damage till the spring a lot of times. So
right. See what starts to come back, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So, hey, we're not just a couple of guys sitting around talking about the weather. This is Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. I'm with Mike Beneduce Vineyards. Mike, good to see you again.
Yeah,
Mike's been a pal for a while, and we've done events together, and we talked together, and we've tasted together. And I was talking with producer Mike yesterday, and I said, there's snow on the ground. Mike, let's go visit a winery. So I shot off a message to Mike and says, Mike, I want to come out and see what's happening at the winery because it's snow on the ground. It's 14 degrees. What perfect time to take a drive out and see things. So basically what I've been wanting to do with Mike, and hopefully we're going to kick it off now, is I really want to do like a year look into a vineyard, into a winery, especially in the Northeast, in New Jersey, what it's like and the realities of it, give people sort of an inside view of it. So and here we are. The inside view is what people expect people to see in the tasting room.
This is my job all day.
Mike just sit here with a bottle of wine open, and so we may as well start with the January high point.
Absolutely.
Which is sharing a glass of wine, and this is
our Blue 2, so 2014 Blue 2. So the grape variety is Blaufränkisch. It's an Austrian grape. We're kind of focused on Austrian and Northern French and Italian grapes here. Seem to grow really well in our Hunterdon County climate. And so this is kind of like I describe it as a mix between Pinot Noir and Syrah. So it's got that kind of spiciness to it.
It's got a little pepperiness to it, and I tasted it before.
Yeah. Still very acid driven, so it's a great food wine.
It's got great color.
It's
got a nice nose, and I did taste it before. I'll taste it again. It's really got a nice peppery touch to it without
definitely some spice. I always think like in a good year it gets this like Chinese 5-spice aroma to it, which is just this nice kind of complexity to it.
Yeah, and I know that's your focus with your wines. You are trying to produce wines that are food friendly.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up, my experience with wine has always been at the dinner table.
So we're unfortunately not going to sit here all afternoon and just talk about the weather and things like that. I mean, we're going outside, aren't we? We're going to go spend some time in the vineyard, which is what all people love to do. That romanticized stroll through the vineyard. We're going to do that today. But one of the things I noticed while we're talking, and we're going to go, take a break, and then we're going to take a look at it. You've got ice on your tanks in here, and it's not because of the weather.
No, not that cold.
Not that cold in here. No, can't see our breath. So we're going to come back in a moment, and we're going to find out why there's ice on the tanks, and then complete our little January sojourn. So this is Riesling, and this is from this past harvest.
Yeah. So this is our 2017 Riesling. So you can see it's a little bit cloudy, kind of like a blue moon beer. So this is unfiltered still. So we'll go through this cold stabilization process. Next week we'll filter this, and then it'll be pretty much getting ready to bottle. We'll bottle this up in April.
Wow.
So smells really good. It's very cold when you taste it. I mean, this is a freezing wine, but yeah, 17 was a really nice year for us. Really bright aromatics, kind of this limey, citrusy flavor to it, very floral.
Yeah, I mean, even though it's cold, and cold kills the taste buds.
Right.
You keep it in your mouth, the flavors are really coming through.
Yeah.
It's really great.
Yeah,
it's pretty.
Glad you like it.
Yeah. Cheers. Super. Cheers. Okay, hate to say it. I think we need to go outside now. Be back in a moment.
Suit up.
Oh, man. Do I have to? We're really going to go out here, aren't we? In the in the frozen
Taking you out of
tundra.
your cozy house. You know, you get to see how the
I'm
your
at
calf lives.
I'm at my kitchen table right now with the heated floor. This is.
But I bet you'll appreciate the wine after this. Little
You know what? When I came to that harvest with you a few years back, it gave me a lot more appreciation, and it's important not to be a poser. So last time I was at Beneduce Vineyards, I was barefoot in shorts, listening to a band, drinking glasses of wine, walking in the grass.
good times.
And
Good
and that was September,
Right.
and it's. There's no grass here, Mike.
No,
What happened?
it's under there.
It's under there somewhere.
4 inches
Right.
of snow.
So we're going to dispel this whole notion that it's a glamorous and sexy life that you live owning a winery in New Jersey or anywhere in the Northeast for that matter. It's below freezing. There's a nice breeze here today.
Yeah.
But work's got to be done. I mean, you guys don't shut down in January. This is not a seasonal operation. It's a year-round
Definitely
operation.
not. I mean, this crop is a year-round crop. So really, with the exception of November, after we're done harvesting, we're out here year-round. So, you know, it's starting in January 1st. We start pruning. Takes us 3 months to hand prune
Happy New
everything. Yeah, exactly. So all these vines are hand pruned. We've got almost 20,000 vines.
Wow.
Somebody has to go through and prune each one, and it's definitely an art form. It's not something that you can do with machines to the way that we do it. And I think the quality of our wine a lot of times is dictated by how well we prune.
And why are you pruning? And
Sure.
And why is this important? And why is it getting done now?
Sure. So I mean, you can see this is a vine that's gone dormant. So just like
Yep.
a maple tree, it drops its leaves in the fall.
About
goes
6.5, 7 feet high now.
Yep, about 7 feet. Drops its leaves, goes dormant in the winter. So these buds are alive, but they're basically sleeping.
Okay.
So when the plant is sleeping like this in the winter is when we want to go through and select the buds that we want to start our next season with.
So we'll be right back, and Mike's going to give us a lesson on pruning.
Cool.
I mean, there's a lot of vine here. Most people are going to say, well, you're wasting grapes, but you're not really, not at all.
Yeah,
I mean, you're waiting for new growth.
Waiting for new growth. Actually, the vine will be more productive if you prune it the right way than if you just had left everything. Right, so
Yeah.
you need to basically concentrate the energy of the vine into the buds that you want to leave for the remaining year. So, all right, so basically what we're doing is, first thing we're doing is selecting the trunks. So we have 2 trunks.
Mhm.
These are the main trunks.
Yep.
They're permanent wood, so they're gonna last for probably about 10 years before we have to replace them.
Okay.
These vines are actually about 10 years old now, so you can see we're bringing up a trunk here to replace one.
Mhm.
A lot of times if a trunk gets damaged or it's crooked or something, we'll want to replace it. So that's kind of like our spare trunk. So
Right.
the first thing we're gonna do is just kind of clean that up. And so we have these 2 trunks. Now from each trunk, we're gonna pick 1 shoot. So a shoot is gonna be picked from, this is the last year's growth, right? So this all was 2017 growth.
Yep.
All was new growth last year. We're gonna pick one of those from each trunk, lay it down across this bottom wire, this fruiting wire, and basically make like a T. So we'll have the trunks and then the canes that we'll lay down. And you can see last year, this was a current year's growth. So this
Yeah.
is 2-year-old wood now.
Yep,
See, it's
yep.
a little bit harder.
Yep.
So basically we're gonna do that. And really the selection of this has to do with a couple things. You wanna look at the quality of the wood. So how much sunlight it got that year. It'll actually change the color of the wood. You wanna make sure it has no disease spots on it. You wanna make sure it's starting from the right area. So it's actually like a game of chess. You gotta think like 3 years ahead.
Right.
So we're gonna start with this one because it's a nice, good one. Nice and straight, clean wood. It starts all the way down here. So we're basically gonna cut that.
Wow. So you're really, you're doing a spot analysis.
Yeah. I mean, and each shoot is really selected by hand. So, you know, that side is basically done. We'll clean that up after.
Yep.
We have our trunk here. And then we have a couple options. 1, 2. Oh, Louie, good.
Hey,
You're
Louie,
back.
How are you?
Couple options here. We have this one, this one, and this one. This is a little bit too thin, so I'd be
Yep.
worried about that making it through the winter.
Right.
So I'd disqualify that. And then based on these other 2, we've got this one and this one. They look equally thick, and this one starts a little bit lower, so I like that better.
Okay.
So we're gonna keep that one.
Eventually.
So then basically what we're gonna do is go through and just clean up the rest of this. Is just a T. So we're gonna lay this
it.
one down across the bottom.
Okay.
This one here is gonna lay down across the bottom. So we actually go through, we clip off even all these little tendrils. The idea is that we don't want any more wood in the vineyard than we absolutely need, because any piece of old wood is a source for disease or fungus.
Gotcha.
So you don't want that stuff to build up. You want to basically start as clean as you can. So you're ending up basically with that after all what we started with. We just have about 19,999 to go.
Left to go.
That's it.
That's amazing. So this is the glamorous life.
This is January for a
Of
winemaker
January
and
for a
a
winemaker.
grape grower, and it's real farming.
But I think it's good for people to know what goes on in the quote-unquote off-season, because there is no off-season really.
Yeah,
you're a 12-month operation. This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped with Mike Beneduce. As always, trying to bring you really interesting stories with interesting people, good stories, and Mike certainly fits that bill. Thanks for watching, and we'll catch you next time in the Grapes Unwrapped. Looks like a carburetor looking thing.
Pretty much, yeah.
What is that?
This is an airlock. So these are our Chardonnay barrels. So because we're fermenting the wines in these barrels, the yeast is eating oxygen like us, breathing in oxygen, breathing out CO2.
Gotcha.
So because they're doing that a lot very rapidly when they're fermenting, they need a place for that CO2 to escape. So it's kind of like a one-way valve. The CO2, when this is fermenting, will actually bubble up through that water and escape out, so the pressure in the barrel doesn't build. But it prevents anything from getting in there. I can't just have an open top and let bugs and stuff get in there.
Right.
So it's kind of just like a one-way valve.
So we are going to open the top. And by the way, hi again, everybody. This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped, with Mike Beneduce, Beneduce Vineyards, and we're continuing our series on a year in the life of a vineyard and winery. So thanks for having us back, Mike.
Thanks for coming.
Great. So today we're going to do a few things again, inside and outside, weather permitting. So we're opening up the barrels. We're going to do some barrel work today, right?
We are. So this is our 2017 Chardonnay.
Okay.
So one of the things we do first time when we open a barrel is we want to look inside, and you just want to kind of look at the surface of the wine. One thing we would be worried about is if there's any surface film growing on the top of the wine. That would mean there might be a bacterial infection in there. So just visually, we first check it. There's nothing on there. You can see it's clean. Kind of looks like the bottom of a well. And then we want to pull a sample. So we use that with, this is called a wine thief. It's basically just like a big turkey baster or a straw. You stick it into the barrel, put your thumb over the top of it, and then it comes out with wine. So this is our 2017 Chardonnay. So we'll taste this first, and then I'll tell you kind of what we're doing to the wine at this point.
Great.
So you can see this is unfiltered. These wines are fermented and aged in the barrel on what we call the lees, or the yeast sediment. So we're adding a small amount of yeast to this at the beginning of the fermentation. This is way back in October. It's fermenting in this barrel. We let that yeast settle to the bottom of the barrel. For a Chardonnay, we actually age on the lees, or the yeast sediment. And the thought behind this is that basically, as the yeast the cells break down, they add a little bit of a creaminess to the wine.
Give that richness to it.
Exactly. So we want that in our Chardonnay. So we're aging on the lees. So you can see it's a little bit cloudy. Again, kind
but
of
still has a really pretty color to it, which
really
is
nice color. So let's taste this, see what we think it is.
Yeah, I mean, you got some really great acidity in that wine. That really is coming through.
Yeah, 17 at beautiful acidity. So kind of what we're doing at this point is trying to figure out how often we want to, how much texture we want to add to that wine. So we know the acidity is always going to be the backbone of that wine. I always want our Chardonnay to be acid driven. But one of the things we can do is kind of fatten it up as it ages, and the way we do that is through lees stirring, or what the French call bâtonnage. Stirring, because I don't speak any French. But most of these techniques were developed in France, and so they have the original terminology, which they call bâtonnage, and this is what they would call a bâton. This is the bâton, so this is what they're using. So a bâton is very just simply a curved tool like this. You can see this one has kind of a football-shaped thing at the bottom that swivels. And so what we're doing, you can imagine the yeast sinking into this barrel. The bottom of the barrel is curved, so we need to basically scrape the yeast off the bottom of the barrel. And so that's what this thing is letting us do. It goes in through the top of the barrel, and you can see when it goes in, then it can sit at the bottom of the barrel like this, and I'm basically just going to scrape the bottom of the barrel. And so we'll do it from either direction.
Folks, this isn't one of those high-tech putters out there, so don't go looking for it at your golf stores or anything.
And this is an old school technique, and this is, bâtonnage, lees stirring. We have to do this on every separate barrel, typically once a week when the wine is young.
Early
and
on,
as that starts to build richness, it really is barrel by barrel. So one of them might need it once a month, one of them still might need it once a week. And so part of that for me is tasting it and saying how much do I want to fatten this up, how much creaminess do I want to add.
And that's based on taste.
Based on taste, totally.
And that's just another example of how you don't shut down. You're a year-round, 12-month operation when you've got wine going.
Yeah, I mean, these are still really young wines. These will be bottled in June, so we're just sort of kind of lightly guiding them toward that. And you know, this is one of the important things we have to do. Yeah. So I'll show you on this one, and then maybe you can do it in the other direction.
Excellent. Mike's cheap labor today. Yeah. not necessarily good labor, but cheap labor.
So bottom of the barrel's curved like this. I'm starting at this end and then just kind of scraping it into the middle.
Okay.
So that side's done. Why don't you try it this side? And so you're going to basically put your hand here and then just kind of scrape toward the middle.
Just like this? Wow, I already sound like I'm not doing a good job, Mike.
It takes a while to get a feel for it. So try to picture it dragging along the bottom of the barrel. And you can actually feel it. You can feel the wood.
You can feel it, and you can see it in the wine. You can see, you already see that it's already blending in.
Absolutely.
Into visually, you can get a sense of that.
Absolutely. So yeah, let's pull another sample, and we will we'll see what that wine looks like after. You've stirred the barrel up, and you can see already.
You can really see it.
Totally different color.
Yep.
So now that yeast sediment is basically stirred back up into the wine, and you'll notice actually even on the palate, you'll taste a little bit of the difference. Just it's a little bit thicker, a little bit creamier. And as you could see, it's almost like milky white.
Yeah.
So you can see the difference here.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, really creamy. On the nose, I don't find that much of a difference because it really is the same wine. I mean, the yeast is imparting those aromatics slowly over time. So it's not like you're going to notice a total difference on the nose, but on the palate, you're going to pick up a little bit more richness.
I'd say there's still lots of fresh fruit in that nose.
Yeah, really citrusy.
Beautiful, yeah.
I really like where this is headed. Again, it's just finding that balance between how do we want to balance that creaminess with the acidity at this point, and then also how is this barrel going to work itself into the larger blend. So we're looking over about 20 barrels of Chardonnay. They're all from 2017 vintage. The same fruit, it's just that each barrel is actually going to be different. So we use different coopers, we use different barrel makers. We use wood from different forests. We use different toast levels. And so even though each of these barrels is from the same fruit, they all actually taste totally different.
Right.
And so part of our job this time of year is to work on blending. We lose an angel's share or an evaporative loss. And in this barrel, it might be about 1 bottle per month. So over the life of this wine, it's going to lose about a full case worth of wine just evaporating into the air.
Lucky angels.
Yeah, that's why it smells so good in here.
That's right.
One of the things we have to do is top up. So we want to we don't want to just let all that wine evaporate out and let it go lower and lower, because any bacteria that wants to grow on the wine is going to grow on the surface. So we want to basically eliminate that surface.
Right. So you're keeping it
exactly. So we have to add more Chardonnay.
And change the flavor profile too.
Exactly. So it's basically we just use a lemonade pitcher here, pretty low tech, and we're basically just pouring wine until it gets all the way back up to the top.
Mike, last time we were here, it was January.
Yep.
It was freezing out. It was 14 degrees out. And these tanks were frozen, but not, as we learned in the video, by design, not because it was cold out. They're no longer frozen. What's happening? Where are we at now, a couple months later?
So this is our Gewurz, same one we tasted last time. And these were being cold stabilized last time we tasted it. These have now been cold stabilized. They've now been filtered, so it's a clear wine. We're getting ready for bottling. So we're bottling this in about a week, a week from today actually. And so, the wine is basically where it's going to be when it goes into bottle, which is a nerve-wracking point for a winemaker because there's no more changes. It's kind of like hand your test paper in,
it's done.
Pencils down. So what we're doing today is just doing kind of a last chemical analysis of the wine, just getting a pulse on where the pH is, where the sulfite level is, all that kind of stuff that we want a baseline for when it goes into bottle. So you can see it's been filtered, nice and clear. I'm going to pour a little into your glass here so you can taste it.
Wow! Just right off the bat, the nose
super
is really
intense.
It's really what it should smell like, Taste it too. Wow, that really got great accent of flavor in that. I think that's how I would describe it. There's real accent on the flavor in this.
Nice, awesome.
Yeah.
So we're gonna head in. We're gonna give a little sample of this to our lab tech in here, and she's gonna run some numbers.
So Nora, we're gonna see Nora is lab tech, assistant winemaker.
Yes.
This is the science part of wine.
The fun, nerdy part.
Yeah.
Stuff that gets me excited.
Hi, Nora.
Hello.
This is Nora, this is our assistant winemaker here, and she is running a couple tests on the wine. We're running, number one, a pH. So behind her is a pH meter. That just tells you basically the basic level of acidity in the wine. We want to know that number before it goes in the bottle. And then this kind of Breaking Bad Frankenstein looking thing is where we're checking our sulfite
I thought it was a
level.
New York City cocktail bar.
Exactly. The little smoked, smoked orange peel on top.
Beautiful. This is beautiful. And that'll be $19.
Yeah, exactly. So this is how we're checking our preservative level, and we want to make sure that the preservative level is correct before we go into wine, because again, we don't have any other chances to change
You'll know
that.
the alcohol level.
Alcohol level
What
we're
do you
doing
think is
today.
coming in at, by the way, on this?
Alcohol, that's probably around 12.9.
Now, once again, we have to go outside.
And outside. Hope you brought gloves this time.
I didn't bring gloves, but it is also about
It's warmer.
50 degrees
Yes.
warmer, probably, or at least 40 degrees warmer than
Right.
last time. So we'll see you outside.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks.
Early on in pruning of 20,000 vines
Yes.
2 months ago, and this is basically it, right?
Yeah, we just finished yesterday, actually.
Wow.
Number 20,000.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Feels good.
Yeah, I bet it does.
Now on to the next thing.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Never
not if they
stops.
don't have anything else to
No.
do. So where are we at now?
So now these are pruned. So you can see last time it was kind of a mess. Now they're pruned down to what we basically are going to use this year. So we're actually going to use only 2 of these, and we leave 3 just in case one breaks while we're tying it.
Gotcha.
And so that it gives us a couple options basically when we're tying down. So that's what we call this, is cane tying or tying down. So this bottom wire here, this is called our fruiting wire.
Okay.
So what we're doing is basically picking 2 of these canes, wrapping them around the fruiting wire, and that's going to be kind of our start for the season. So you can see here I got 2 trunks.
Yep.
I want to basically pick 1 cane per trunk.
Okay.
I like this one.
Good.
And you're a couple things that go into the decision. One is the thickness of the wood. So it should be about pencil thick. You can see these are all nice thickness.
Yep.
And also the second thing is where they start. So you can't start a cane above the fruiting wire, because then you don't have any buds for next year. You have to actually think 2 years ahead.
Interesting.
So I'm picking this one because it starts in a nice low spot and it's a good thickness level. And so we're basically just going to kind of work our way onto this bottom wire. And grapevines are vines, so
Yeah.
they want to hold
They
on to
wanna hold
something.
on, yeah.
They grow these little tendrils throughout the year,
Yep.
and so they want to basically
They
grab
really
on.
lock in.
All we're doing is just a very gentle twist.
You're leading them, and
You're
then
leading them.
they'll do the rest.
Exactly. So you can see that wants to stay there, and then we use just a tiny little rubber band tie, and that's just going to kind of anchor the tip onto the wire, so that if it gets windy or something, it doesn't unwrap. So we've got one in there.
So it's a real sign of spring too that these are so much more pliant now, right?
Yeah. So last time they were like a little bit brittle and
really,
cracking.
really, yeah.
So you can feel these actually now. They bend.
So you know there's
Definitely.
the water's really returning to the vine.
And you'll actually see it off the tip. There'll be little drops of water, and that's actually the vine waking up from the spring. The roots are absorbing water now. It's sort of like
straws.
pushing everything. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Pushing everything out. That capillary action.
Yep.
So we're just doing the same thing
You're
here.
talking science again.
I know. Sorry, nerdy
No,
terms. I can't help it.
Do not be sorry.
So we're just wrapping that one there. We're going to tie this off here. And then if we need to adjust the length on them, we can just always clip them a little bit.
Because you want to keep them within the.
Exactly. And anytime we prune something, we always make a 45-degree angle. And this is good even for people at home pruning apple trees or anything. If you're cutting the tip of something, you never want to cut it flat, because what that does is the water droplet actually sits there, and that can promote fungus to grow. If you cut it on a 45, it actually promotes the water to kind of wick away from it, and it drops off, and then you get a cleaner cut.
Good to know. Really good to know.
So we've got 2 down. We don't need this third one, so we're actually just going to clip this off. And then that's
into the
basically
pile,
where
and-
we're starting.
And when this dries up a bit, then you're going to come and basically grind these up, mulch them into.
Yeah, so this is
ground.
really good natural fertilizer. It has all the nutrients that the vine needed to grow that wood, so we're basically just going to recycle that. We're going to come in with a mower, chop that back up, let those nutrients go back into our ground, and then they're going to reuse it for the next year's wood. So you can see what we're starting with here is all of our buds are starting in this kind of same horizontal line.
Right.
Each of these is a bud. So when they start to emerge, what we have is kind of a nice consistent growing space, and they all start to grow up. throughout the season, we use this system of wires, catch wires and fixed wires, to basically train those shoots to grow up through the wires, and so they create that nice thin canopy that we had at the end of the summer, and that's why we want to start this all here. The grapes actually only emerge on the first like 6 inches of growth from the shoots. So that's why we start them all in this horizontal line, because once, you know, the shoot will go all the way up to the top and actually keep going. We'll actually have to cut it, but the grapes will only be in the first 6 inches. So we have this really nice fruiting zone, makes it easier to harvest, right, instead of going up and down and up and down. And it also allows us to do things like leaf pulling, where we can open up the canopy a little bit and give a little bit more air and sunlight. Yeah, you got to be really reactive, and honestly, you do have to listen to the plants. You know, plants have energy, and they have a means of reacting to their environment. And I'm not talking about like hippie energy. I'm talking about like science energy. Right. And you know, they might not have a brain, but they do react to sunlight. They do react to water. And so part of my job as a grower is to listen to those things, be tuned into them, and react to them. And so just basically hear what the plant needs and give it that.
Can we go take a look now where you're preparing the new plot?
Definitely. Let's hop on.
Here's Louis. This is not a modern art installation.
A blank canvas.
It's Christo's latest.
Yeah, exactly.
Latest installation. This is a future.
Yeah. So this is going to be Riesling in about 2 weeks. So we typically order the vines from nurseries about 2 years in advance.
Really?
So because they're all custom clones and different rootstocks that we're kind of combining, and still trying to do a couple different combinations of each of those. And so this is going to be another 2 acres of Riesling. So what we've done is last summer we started with this. We did a soil test to see if it needed anything like lime, or, you know, like if you're in a home garden, you need to see if it needs nitrogen or phosphorus. We typically have pretty good soils here, so they don't need a lot of nutrients, but we do hit it with a little bit of lime, which just brings the pH up.
Gotcha.
So reduces the acidity of the soil a little bit. We put that lime down, we plow it with like a big tractor. So just like in your garden, you'd maybe use a rototiller or a hand tiller.
I've got a rototiller, yeah.
Yep, same thing. Ours is just a lot bigger. And then we roll everything nice and flat, and then we put the posts in. So the posts go in first for us, and then we'll actually do planting basically in between the rows in about 2 weeks. We'll start.
Wow. So I'm a home gardener. I've got my tomato plants, my vegetable garden. What are the similarities between what you're doing, what a home gardener does, and where does it get different? I mean, I can go to a catalog. I can start. You're not starting from seed, but you're going to a catalog of sorts, if you will. But yours is custom.
Right. Ours is custom. I think everything's just bigger scale, right? So you're still tilling the soil. You're still prepping it. You're still hopefully putting a garden fence up, right? Ours just happens to be 50 acres big. It's a big garden. And then maybe if you were planting a tomato, you'd put a tomato cage or a stake or something for it to grow up. We're doing the same thing. We got posts, we've got wires. You would be digging a hole maybe with the little trowel or shovel. We use a big auger because we got to dig 2,000 holes here, and so
it's easy.
Digging that with a shovel wouldn't be too fun. It's just a big auger hole. We plant the vine in, and then we put the soil back in, and everything's done by hand. I mean, it's all planted by hand. And then we'll typically go in and put the trellis wires in after that, so that the vines have something to kind of grow up and grab onto.
You're putting these vines in, how long before you get fruit in order to make wine?
Yeah, so we'll get fruit in 2020. So 3 years.
2018, folks.
Right. 3 years down the road, we'll get fruit, and then it'll take, for Riesling, about another year to make the wine. For something like our Pinot Noir, which we're putting another 2 acres in as well, that'll take 3 years to make the wine. So that block we'll plant in 2 weeks, and we won't be drinking that stuff for 6 years.
So this is your process. 2 years to order, and then you put it in the ground. And so it's really 8 years from the time you start thinking about it to the time you're actually able to produce a wine from that.
Yeah, it's a long lag time. And so I think I always try to tell people, like, new growers come in and they say, I don't know, whatever, Chenin Blanc is really hot right now, or whatever.
Why can't you just grow it?
Just plant it. Yeah, like that doesn't work like that. It's not like you can just order something and it's in. We have to think 10 years in advance, and trying to do inventory management and all that kind of stuff comes into play. But
plus, you also have to decide, why you chose this for Riesling and why you chose that for Pinot Noir. There's a reason behind that too, and it wasn't just because you woke up one morning and said, "I think I'd like to have Riesling here and Pinot Noir there." There's a whole process that goes into that. So the other thing, we're here on the edge of your lavender plot. Right, and this was something that we were talking a little bit about last time. You've decided to grow some different things on the property, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm lucky that I get to do a lot of traveling to other wine regions, and one sort of trend that I see, especially in Europe, is this sort of back to a more holistic farm mentality rather than a monoculture, which is planting everything in one crop. So if you think about like the cornfields in Nebraska,
Right.
it's really not healthy. It's very unnatural to have one crop in a specific place. We're doing that with wine grapes to an extent. We do have different varieties of wine grapes, but it's really good for the ecosystem. Add other crops to that ecosystem.
Right.
And so, if you look at our property, it's kind of a bowl, and all the cold air sort of sinks into this lower spot in the farm. So this is the lowest spot of the farm. It's actually too cold to grow grapes here. We wanted to plant something here, and so we ended up planting 4 different varieties of lavender. So this is all English lavender.
Great.
We use dried bouquets, fresh bouquets. We do some oils out of it. Aromatic sachets. Great for cooking. You can make a rub out of it.
I love it. It's one of my favorite ingredients, actually. And the best part too is Louis doesn't smell like wet dog all the other day like today. He's lavender fresh after running through.
Smells great. And we did this as kind of a community outreach project. So we work with a different charity every year. So we let our staff pick a charity, and then we donate 50% of the profit from the sale of lavender to that charity. And we try to use volunteer labor as much as we can to harvest it.
Oh, good.
So we're kind of making it a whole community thing, and just using a part of the farm that had no use, and giving it a purpose, basically.
Was last year the first year?
Yeah, last year was our first harvest on this.
And the plants look great.
Yeah, we also have some beehives because the honeybees love these. So they're great. They pollinate. So you
get some real lavender honey.
Lavender honey, absolutely.
That's great.
Yeah, so it's just a good
and
crop
if the wind
for us.
blows the right way, you can smell it probably.
The neighbors love it. Yeah.
And Louis loves it.
And Louis loves it for sure.
Cool. So Mike, thanks for having us out again.
Absolutely. Thanks for
As
coming.
always, a pleasure to hang out with you, and we'll come back another month or two and see what's happening. Things really will be starting to ramp up next time.
We'll see some green out here next time, which will be nice.
Cool, excellent. Everybody, thanks for tuning in again. This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. Thanks again, Mike Beneduce, Beneduce Vineyards, and we'll see you next time. This is pretty cool stuff.
Thanks, Hank.
Thanks, Michael. Everybody, it's Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. We're back at Beneduce Vineyards with Mike Beneduce. Mike, how you been?
Good, how are you?
Good. So this is our continuation of a year in a vineyard and a year at a winery. What are we going to talk about today? Here we are in June, even though we're kind of a little bundled up today. It's high 50 degrees.
Right.
It's the season hasn't quite gotten off the ground yet. But it's getting
still
there.
early in the day. It'll be nice today, I think. Sun's peeking out.
Yeah, but it's a lot greener.
Yes, yeah, a little different than last time you guys were here.
Sticks when we were here last time.
Exactly, right.
So things do change, and they'll start to change really rapidly now too, won't they?
Yeah, these vines at this point are growing about an inch a day, and you can see they're just kind of climbing towards the sky. So what we're going to do today is a little bit of canopy management. We're going to start kind of tucking these guys in and get some wires up, and then we'll talk about leaf pulling, something we do to kind of expose them to air and sunlight. We got to take a tissue sample so we can make sure the vines have all the nutrients they need. And then I wanted to pay a visit to our new Riesling block.
Cool.
Because last time we were here, we were just about to plant that. Now it's planted, so we can kind of see the final steps of that.
These are
Pinot Noir.
Yep.
So these are 8-year-old vines. Vines, again, are like perennials. They come back every year like an oak tree. Last time we were here, we were pruning them. And so now these are kind of going crazy, growing rapidly, and it's just a mad rush to keep on top of everything this time of year.
So they're almost getting ready to flower.
Yeah, this is actually a cool time of year to be here because we only have about a week of flowering every year, and you guys are here for it. So we'll get some close-ups hopefully on what these grape blooms look like, but it's a really kind of exciting time in the vineyard for us. This is basically the start of the fruit development. So once it flowers, it sets fruit. If you come back in a week or two, these would be little grapes.
Oh.
And then that's kind of the start of our
grapes.
Yeah.
And actually the weather, the way it's been, has been pretty good for this then, right? Hasn't it?
Yeah, we've had a good week of sun.
Yeah.
It's really important to have sun around flowering. So we had a little rain yesterday, which is okay, but looks like a sunny week ahead. So you get better fruit set when there's sun during this time. So we're looking pretty good this week.
So here's a question. I know you harvest your grapes at different times because the grapes become ripe at different times and they develop differently. Do they flower at different times too?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, they're staggered. So Pinot Noir is generally a pretty early blossoming vine. It's also our earliest grape that we harvest. We pick Pinot Noir before everything else.
Gotcha.
But you'll see as we move through the vineyard, some of them are a little bit further behind, and some are actually a little bit ahead.
So it really does. The beginning and the end really matters significantly.
Yeah, I'd say everything blooms within probably 2 weeks, but our harvest spans 2 months.
Gotcha.
So some grapes just take longer time to ripen.
Right.
But everything,
and the fruit development is different with the seasons, and
Exactly.
we'll probably learn that as we go along this year too. But I often wondered if it was really had any impact too, if they start off differently, and they do.
They do.
Cool.
Absolutely.
So let's go hit one of these rows and see what's happening.
All right, let's check it out. Started from the bottom of this block on Friday. You can see my guys are down at the ends of the rows now.
Yeah.
Louis getting a good stretch in after the weekend.
Louis at every row.
Yeah, exactly. So we're gonna start here. So you could see the ends of those rows were really nice and tucked up and kind of straight. And you can see this row looks like a little bit of a wild mess right now.
Right.
So as these plants grow, they are vines, so they generally want to grow up. They're in nature they grow up trees.
Right.
So we have to kind of give them something to grab onto. And if you look, it's kind of cool.
So the tendrils are already kind of latching on.
Yeah, I mean it's amazing how they find a wire and they grab it and they literally pull themselves up.
Yeah.
But what we want to do is just make sure that everything's kind of inside this set of wires that we do. So we'll typically have one person on this side of the row, one person on the other side, and we'll just do it with what's called tucking. So
the tendrils have already started their work. They're clamping on.
Yeah, they're like the arms of the vine. So you can see this guy just naturally put a tendril out.
Yeah.
And he found the wire, and then it wraps around the wire, and that's basically just allowing this shoot to pull itself up. So again, in nature, that would be wrapped around a tree or something else.
Right. I see it with the different vines that I'm growing in my own garden. So what you're doing is you're guiding them.
Exactly.
They're in their early stages in life.
Yeah.
And you're parenting them. You're guiding them. And how do you guide them in order to grow properly?
Yeah, basically we have this system of wires that we do. So they all start down. As they grow, we pick these wires up and create these little kind of channels. And then throughout the growing season, we're just doing what's called tucking. So we would be taking shoots like this and sort of just guiding them in between these wires.
Tucking is not a fancy French phrase. It's literally,
I don't know what the French translation is for that.
You're just tucking.
Right.
And basically, like I said, you're giving them the direction, and they're taking.
Exactly. Yeah, we're just getting everything in between these channels
themselves, and they'll start to. These tendrils will start to almost sometimes immediately. Really
within a couple days, you'll see like this guy will wrap around here, and then they really do just pull themselves up. You just want to make sure that they're in the right channel, because if they start to grow out into the row like this, maybe we hit it with the tractor or it starts to go onto the ground. So we want to basically just get everything in between these two channels. And then we come back once we're done tucking everything, and we have a little clip, and we clip these wires together. And so this kind of like holds all the shoots in here like that. And you're basically just getting an upright growth. So probably within another 2 weeks, these guys will be at the top wire. We'll come back and do the same thing with the top wire. And then vines have what they call indeterminate growth, like tomato plants. They'll just continue to keep growing.
Right. Depending on the conditions, right?
Right. So we only have a certain height of the canopy here. So once these vines get up past this, we'll actually come by and hedge the top of them.
Okay.
So we just have like a big, looks like a big chainsaw, but it's a hedge clipper, and we just go down right and hedge the top of them. We might have to do that 2 or 3 times throughout the season because they'll just keep growing. But the idea is that basically from here to here, we have leaves. And so those are just like a big solar panel all the way down. You don't want it to be too jumbled up in here, because otherwise the leaves start to shade each other. So like this leaf on the outside facing the sun is absorbing 100% of the sun's energy. If there's one leaf in front of it, like it's being shaded, this one is only absorbing 10% of the sun's energy.
Interesting.
So this leaf is actually using more energy then it's producing.
Gotcha.
So we want to basically have 1 or 2 leaf layers throughout the whole canopy. So that's what we make it nice and
the
thin.
reason for, I mean, it's all done by hand.
Right.
It's labor intensive.
Yes.
It's, you know, one of the things that has always struck me about your vineyard is it's planned, it's managed,
Right.
it's organized, it's neat, it's clean. A lot of people are doing seat of the pants, but, and you know, that's nice, but you're not maximizing the quality or potential, are you?
Sure. I mean, it's a long-term investment. It's not the kind of thing where you're planting corn and it's done in a year and then you decide what to plant the next year.
Yeah.
These vines are 8 years old. We have some that are 10 years old. And if you take care of them this year, they're going to look better next year. And so it's kind of it's a long-term investment for us.
Right. Just like when we talked in the last video, your whole plan, and we're going to go over and look at what's been done since then when you were planting the new rootstock. You're thinking 10 years out. You're not thinking
Exactly.
you're not thinking, gee, let's go plant something.
Yeah, no, exactly.
So, cool. Where to next?
Let's do some leaf pulling, and I'll show you guys
Leaf
what
pulling.
kind of our next step is.
I could probably do leaf
You
pulling.
can do some leaf
Yeah,
pulling. I'll show you that. Let's head down here.
So as a kid, when we were taking family pictures, my mother would always, you know, position me in front of the rose bush or whatever plant was flowering because it looked really, you know, nice perspective. But we're not here posing in front of the flowers. This is an important thing. It's not just to look nice when the people come to visit.
Yeah,
right?
no, I mean,
this is your canary in the coal mine.
That's exactly what it is. So yeah, back in the old days, in Italy and France and in Europe, they used to plant roses in the vineyard as, like you said, a canary in the coal mine. So anybody that's grown roses knows that they're really sensitive to mildews, powdery mildew especially. Yeah. So grapes get powdery mildew as well, but roses almost always get it first. Right. So vignerons or grape growers used to plant roses in the vineyards as kind of a scout. So when they would see powdery mildew up here on the leaves of the rose, they would know to go out and spray a crop protectant in the vineyard. And
then they need to if the mildew wasn't present.
Exactly.
So it sort of helps you to intervene only when you need to.
Exactly.
And these look great. I mean, even though it's been kind of a wet season, it's
it's been,
and they do look nice. But again, it's and these will flower all year long, all season long, I should say.
Yeah, and it's kind of a little homage to my ancestors as well. In Italy, were rose growers. Yeah. And then when they came over to the States, they moved into Madison, which was known as the Rose City. And so they actually grew roses and drove them into New York City to the farm markets and stuff. And that's kind of how my ancestors coming over here got into agriculture. So it's a little bit of both for us. Yeah. Now we also have these kind of complex weather model systems that are calculating relative humidity and temperature and saying, powdery mildew is sporulating today. And so we're using both. We're using technology and we're also using the old school way of doing it. And so it's kind of nice to have both.
Well, we were talking on the other rows. One of the things that you do here, I do in my tomato garden because I've learned that from my father and my father-in-law, who learned it from their fathers from Italy, who were growing tomatoes and growing roses as well too. Sure. And it's it's kind of old school, but there's a reason behind that as well.
No need to reinvent the wheel.
So no, but yet at the same time, there's so much that's available to you
absolutely.
that helps you to get your job done.
We've come so far really in the last 100 years in grape growing, and I always tell people there's no reason to accept technology in every other part of your life and then for some reason think that farming can't benefit from that, right? You have to be able to pick and choose.
It's technology and touch.
You have
to have the touch, you have to have the experience of being out here, and you are out here daily.
Yes.
And then technology becomes a great aid to you at the same time. So it's, and maybe a lot of times it's reinforcement, right?
Yeah. Definitely.
Yeah, cool. Let's go see what's been done already.
Cool.
So this row has been completed already?
Yes. So we did these on Friday. So you can see, you look down, they're kind of nice and sandwiched in between there.
Nothing's poking out.
Right. Everything's pinched in. The wires are pinched in here. So we're gripping that really nice and tight. And in about another 2 weeks, these will be up at the top wire. We'll come back and do the same thing at the top wire, and then we'll start hedging like I was talking about. But probably in another week or so, we're going to have to come through and start doing what we call leaf pulling. It's just exactly what it sounds like. We're pulling leaves. So the way we prune these, we were talking about.
That's not the French phrase.
Yeah. we were talking about in the winter when we prune these. The reason we prune them the way we do is because all the fruit is in the same zone. So we have what's called a fruiting zone. So if you look down here, right now all the flowers, are like in the first 6 inches of growth, and then it's all leaves from there up. Yep. So this is, again, a really cool time of year to be here because this is the flower blooming. Yeah. So grapes are self-pollinating. They have male and female parts. So we don't need to have like bees or anything to pollinate, but the grapes themselves pollinate each cluster. each of these flowers will flower and turn into a berry, basically.
Wow. So I can see that they're already forming here, right?
Yeah, so actually these haven't opened up yet.
Okay.
And you can see these have just opened up yet. And so what we want to do at this time of year is we want to start to be able to get some direct sunlight and some wind on these clusters.
Okay.
Because that removes the humidity from them, basically.
Gotcha.
We're basically manipulating the microclimate just where the grapes are.
Right.
So we'll literally come through here and start pulling leaves.
To expose them.
And right, so you can see basically just opening up that part of the canopy.
Yep. And you're leaving the leaves right there.
I'm
as
basically
organic
going,
matter.
Yep. Oh yeah, we want these to go back into the soil.
Yep.
No reason to pull them out. And so we're basically just increasing air circulation so that,
as I say, you're airing it out.
Yep.
You're opening them up, giving them the good stuff.
and so when you get some, morning dew like this, the grapes dry out a lot quicker when you have that. You're also getting direct sunlight on them. So when these set fruit, you're going to start to have some direct sunlight on the fruit. And so that actually changes the flavor components in the vine. We call it farming for flavor.
It makes them happy.
Yep, makes them happy, helps them ripen a little quicker.
Yeah.
Warms them up a little bit. So all those things really make a big difference. And so this is a really time-consuming, labor-intensive job. There are machines that do this, but they don't do it as well as human hands.
Right, because they're pulling everything off. And
Right.
you're probably losing good.
Yeah, and
Good
you're gonna hit some
stuff with it, and-
flowers, you're gonna
yeah.
bruise some stuff.
Yep.
But we'll basically go through, we do this typically on the east side of the vine first to get
Okay.
some morning sun on it. And it's kind of like acclimating them to the sunlight. And then after a couple weeks, we'll come back and clean up the west side. And so we're literally gonna have fully exposed clusters by the time those set fruit. You'll see it's really nice and open here, and then this will all be a full canopy.
You're keeping it in this zone for a few reasons, right? Obviously, it's easier to harvest.
Easier to harvest, right?
So and everything's done by hand,
Yep.
so that's quicker, especially once everything's ready to pick, right?
Right.
You don't want to hang in there too long. But it also, is this giving it the maximum or the best exposure to the elements? by
Yeah, I
keeping
mean,
it at that
you can
level?
imagine if we didn't have, like, if there were grape clusters all up and down here,
Right,
how would you do
right.
something like leaf pulling? You'd be like pulling
Right.
this leaf and that leaf. It's
And I would think that you get more consistency than in your fruit and
much more
your growing and the
consistency.
ripeness when you
Yeah,
do it
because
that way
your
too.
whole fruiting zone is basically naked at
Yeah,
that point,
yeah.
and so you have the wind can come right through here, and that's one of the really cool parts about our site is that it's really open, and we're the second highest place in our county. So we're on the top of this little knoll here, and we almost have a constant wind during the day, and so the stuff really just dries out here. So
That's
it's
good.
definitely a good site for grapes.
Looking ahead later in the season, do you have to continue to manage the canopy, or because there might be certain conditions where you're gonna have to keep pulling more leaves, right? if
Yeah,
you're not
I
getting
mean,
enough heat and sun, maybe.
It could
or-
be, yep. We always manage that block by block. It's not like we do the same thing every block. So
Okay.
something like Pinot Noir, I'm going to pull a little bit less leaves than I would, say, Cabernet Franc. That really needs hot, direct sunlight.
Gotcha.
And so as we get more experience with each of these different vines, we're sort of tweaking our techniques in each block, and it's cool because it makes it exciting for me. I'm not just going out and doing the same thing.
Right.
I'm listening to the vine, I'm listening to the wines that they produce, so you get this kind of full feedback loop, and then sort of tweaking our ideas every year.
And the professional challenge of New Jersey is that the seasons are never going to be consistent.
Sure.
So you're pulling or not pulling at different times of the year or
Yes.
not as well,
Yep.
because it's you never know what the weather's
Yeah,
going
it
to be like.
changes with the weather, changes with a lot of things. We might get a week of rain, and it's tough to work out here in the rain, so then we're really behind. So
Yeah.
we have a lot of challenges here, but we're working through them. We're having
And
fun
there are
doing
wine regions, of course, that are so remarkably consistent that they can do the same thing every year.
They can, yeah.
Even though the way the world is these days, it's even those consistent areas aren't quite as consistent as they used to be
Yeah,
in some
I mean,
cases.
if you don't believe in climate change, you're not a farmer. So
You're not
it's-
exactly. That's what I like to say. It's not a political conversation.
no,
it's
it's real.
It's agricultural conversation.
Right. I mean, and we were, I was just traveling to Greece and Sicily, and
Yeah.
growers in both places, one of their first comments was things are changing. The climate change.
and again, that's what made me think of that, is that those were places that were remarkably consistent year
Right,
to year in
right.
their weather, and they're not
Yeah, they're
anymore.
not.
They're really not.
Yeah, and they've been growing varieties there for 1,000 years, the same varieties, and now the wine style is changing so rapidly in the last 10 years because things are getting warmer. So everybody's adapting. It's not just
Yeah.
grape growers either. That's farmers all over the world are adapting, and That's
Yeah.
luckily they're pretty ingenuous. All right, so you're up. Your turn.
All right, so you're going to teach me how to pull these. And like I said, I pull suckers off my tomato plants. So this isn't quite the same thing, but I'm trying to just clear the path here in the middle, right?
Exactly. Everything from this wire down, and the easiest way to do it is kind of grip it with your thumb and just snap down.
Oh, so I'm not even pulling from I'm just pulling from the leaf.
Yep.
Got
and
it.
It'll come with the whole
Got it. I see.
petiole and
Okay,
everything.
so I don't need to go right to the stem. I just need to. Oh yeah, look at that. That's a lot easier.
Yep.
Yeah.
And when you get going, it's crazy. People, you'll see my guys will be doing about
off, man.
30 vines in a minute, and they're just moving through here. But
stop showing off.
No, you're doing good.
I'm just trying to say thank you. My unskilled labor here, I'm excellent. There we go. Even though you guys are skilled because they have to know what to pull.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm looking here, I'm thinking, holy jeez, I'm not pulling.
You can't put them back on, unfortunately.
I just pulled a sip of wine.
Right, yeah.
So these are self-pollinating. You said earlier you don't need bees.
Right, we don't. So they have both male and female parts basically contained in the same flower. And so you can see here the little flower, there's pollen on that. It's going to basically pollinate itself, and then each of these little flower capsules will turn into an individual grape. And they start out really tiny like that. And then basically for the next month, the grapes will expand in size until they get to full size. They'll still be green, but they'll expand. And then basically like in mid-July, they start to turn color and they start to ripen and the sugar content comes up. And hopefully next time you guys come out, we'll see some grapes on the vines here and we can go through that kind of whole process.
What bugs do you need?
We like most bugs out here. That's one of the nice things about growing grapes in this area is we don't have a lot of insect problems.
That's
so
good.
really the only things I have to deal with are things like Japanese beetles, which everybody has to deal with.
Yeah.
But they come July 1st every year, and so we kind of know they're coming.
For the holiday weekend.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's one other bug called grape berry moth. So it's actually a moth. They lay eggs inside the grapes, and then like a little caterpillar basically eats its way out. So one of the things that's nice is they don't like sunlight. So that's another thing we do to expose this like that. They like to kind of hide in these leaves in here, and it's more protected. So when we have a clean fruiting zone like this, they don't really like that. So that's one of the reasons we're doing this as well.
And that's so that's great. So you don't have to again intervene as often or as much because of your growing conditions.
We definitely try to work with nature in that. We have some good bugs out here too. Ladybugs are always a good thing. There's they eat the aphids and all the other little kind of creatures that are out here. So we definitely try to be as little manipulative as we can. But.
Right. And except for everything that you do by hand.
Yes, well, yeah,
everything.
Exactly. Yeah. And then another thing we're doing this time of year is we're doing what's called a tissue sample. So we want to make sure that as the vine approaches its sort of fruit set stage, it has all the little nutrients that it needs. And so we're basically going to take a sample of these leaves. We'll send them to a lab. They chop them up, make them into basically a solution, and they test them for things like nitrogen and potassium and boron and all these little micronutrients. And then if we find that there's something that's missing, like maybe the vine needs a little calcium or a little magnesium, we can actually just come out and hit the vines with them so that we're not spraying fertilizers just ad nauseum. We're basically giving the vine exactly what it needs.
What it needs, right. So where do you send them to?
We send them to a lab. We send them to Cornell just because I have connections
why
there.
Not?
But any of the state schools, Rutgers, Penn State, they all have basically labs that will work with farmers and basically figure out that kind of stuff, do tissue analysis.
And you've got your own lab, so to speak. I mean, are you able to do any sort of
I don't have the equipment to do this kind of stuff.
To go that deep, but you could do other analysis too when you need to, which is nice.
We do mostly wine analysis, and then this is really the one thing we do. We do a soil sample, and we do a leaf sample, send them into a lab. So do that in every block every year so that we know.
Just once a year?
Yep, once a year pretty much. And so when we're doing that, we want to take a sample of basically the youngest fully formed leaf. So the thought process here is that the younger the leaf, the more reflective it is of sort of where the vine is right now. But if it's not fully formed, it's not going to have all the nutrients it needs. So that's not going to be a good way to analyze. So we'll kind of start from the top and work our way down until we get to a leaf like this that's fully formed.
Yep.
And we're just going to snap that off.
Not just bigger, but it's got deeper color and all too.
Deeper color. But you can actually see, like, these are missing something. So you see how they're dark green in the center?
Yes, and they're not
and
quite
a little bit lighter on the end.
Yep.
So I could tell that these are missing something. I got a feeling it's magnesium, because this block always needs a little magnesium. But we're going to check that first, and then if we need a little bit of something, we can hit them with that. So we're just going to go through and pick some samples here. We'll put them in a bag, and we'll send them out.
standing right in the middle of your art installation.
Right.
It fits in very nicely with your Maplewood lifestyle.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And so we're right here in the middle. This is a 2-acre plot. This is to give people an idea. I mean, this is what 2 acres looks like.
Yep.
And this is
Riesling. Yeah, so we got about 3,000 new Riesling vines we planted last month here.
So we're here right at the beginning of spring. It was dirt.
Right.
Ready to prep.
Prepped,
The
but not
poles,
planted.
I think, are in, right?
Yeah,
And,
the poles go in first, so we do that in the summer before. And then the next thing we do is we have augers, kind of like what you use to drill if you go ice fishing.
Yep.
Looks like that. And so we dig the holes first. So between this and the Pinot Noir, we dug about 5,000 holes. So once you do that, then we come back basically a couple days later and start planting everything. So the vines just look like sticks basically with roots on them at that point. They got a couple buds on the top. We dig about 2 feet deep to give the roots kind of nice room to grow down. We put the vine in, cover it back up, pack it in, and then each of the vines gets one of these grow tubes. So as they're young, you want a kind of a way to get them to grow up straight and get protected so they don't get hit by the mower or anything.
And
so
they've already grown a good foot and a half,
yeah,
right?
so I mean, we put in one of these, it's called a pencil rod. It's basically just a stake to help the vine grow up that. We put on a grow tube, and then you can see, yeah, these started as 2 buds, and they're growing up nice now. So these are going to kind of wrap themselves around this pole. By the end of the year, we'll get it up out of the grow tubes. You can see them peeking out of the grow tubes already.
Yeah.
And we'll kind of lay them down across this wire. And then at one point, probably like in August, we'll come through and put in the remaining wires here and sort of give it a way to flush itself out.
Now the grow tubes actually obviously protect them.
Yep.
Because they're young, and I mean, critters could probably come through here. And,
critters
and
or the mower or anything.
But they actually they provide some added heat too to help
They
growing.
can, yeah. It helps the microclimate a little bit. It protects it from things like wind, and so we basically try to do grow tubes on everything right away, because you can see putting it back over a vine is not the easiest thing, but getting it right away, it protects it from everything, and then we can come in and manage weeds and stuff like that in here.
Just planted.
Yep.
I know we talked last time about the business plan, the business model of trying to figure out, when to plant, what to plant, when to order. Because you ordered these a couple of years ago. You said the root
we
stock.
ordered these 2 years ago.
It is 2018. When will you start producing fruit to make wine from this plot?
Yeah, so usually in their 3rd year, they'll start to produce a small crop of fruit.
Okay.
In their 4th year, there'll be a full harvest.
Gotcha.
So we got at least another 2 or 3 years before we get any fruit out of this.
Yeah.
Luckily, Riesling is a little bit easier to make in terms of time. It takes about a year to make that wine.
Good.
So we'll be drinking wine from this block in about 4 years.
Okay. The Pinot's going to take a little longer.
Pinot's going to take, Pinot takes 3 years to make, basically 2 years in oak and then a year in the bottle.
Yep.
But we're getting ahead of everything now. We know that we're projecting basically what we're going to be selling in 3 or 4 years. So we're really excited about this block. The vines have been doing really well in the first couple of weeks here, so that's a good sign. It's not like
So I'm looking out over here, and I could see in some rows the vines are actually up above the tubes.
Yeah.
So is that giving you an early indication of maybe how this land is going to sort of produce? Or where you're
not yet at this point. It's not
a
like
little too soon to tell.
A lot of times if you have like more water in one spot, you'll see a little bit more growth in that spot.
Gotcha.
It's a little bit inconsistent here so far, so I haven't noticed any general patterns, but we're definitely looking at that stuff early on.
Okay.
Just because stuff like, the block that's above that, our Blaufränkisch, that one corner of it tends to get a little bit more water just because it's located on the hill. So I make the rosé from that side, and then I make the red from the drier side. So we are kind of looking at that even within a block.
Interesting.
How things are.
And the grass wasn't here when we were here last time too, right?
No.
So that's all.
So we kind of rip up everything here when we're augering and planting, and so we wait, and then after we're done planting, we come through and rake this all out, make it smooth, and we plant grass. And then it takes a couple of weeks for everything to come up. But yeah, the grass is really important too. It also helps prevent soil erosion.
Right,
so if this was bare ground, every time it rains, this would all wash out. So this kind of roots everything in.
Moderates temperature?
Moderates temperature a little bit. It helps beneficial insects live in here, and it also helps compete with the vines for water a little bit. So the grass, as you know, you got to water your grass at home when it's dry in the summer.
Yeah.
They use a lot of water, and so when we have some rains, the grass basically pulls most of it and just leaves what we need basically for the vines.
Cool.
Yeah.
Who mows the grass?
I do.
You just want to get away every now and then. You're like, I'm taking the mower out.
No, it's actually really important for me to do that because it allows me to travel every row every week. So that's really my best way of scouting, because I'm not just mowing blindly. Sometimes I got an audiobook on or something, but I'm really looking at each row and saying, all right, if there's a problem here, let's get on that right away. So that's a way for me to basically check every vine every week. No, and it's really important for me to be out here. I mean, it's my responsibility, these things, and there's 20,000 vines out here. So luckily, we're basically done in the winery for the summer. So we've bottled all of our wines that we're going to bottle this year. So I'm literally out here 5 or 6 days a week, and then in the tasting room the rest of the time. So I get to spend time doing things like mowing and working with the guys. And we have some new people on the crew, so I always try to go out in the morning and kind of show them what we're doing, explain why we're doing it, because they always do a better job if they know why we're doing it.
A couple questions popped into mind on the drive out here. One again, as we talked about earlier, follow you on social media, you follow me, and those great vacation pictures of Greece and Sicily. Yeah, it was great. It was great. That's why the pictures were great.
Yeah. We were traveling with a friend who's a professional photographer, so I said, like, this is the first trip I've taken where the pictures were actually as good as the vacation. I felt like.
But so you're in Greece and Sicily. You're never going to grow grapes that are being grown on Santorini or on Mount Etna. And as much as you probably would have loved to after tasting them to be able to do something like that, what do you, besides having a blast, having an amazing time, what do you take away professionally from a trip like that?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. I mean, we're never going to grow those grape varieties, but we're still growing grapes. And so it would be like two apple growers meeting. They might be growing different varieties, but they're still growing apples. So there's techniques that they're doing there that I'm not saying we're going to change everything we're doing, but it gives me an idea of ways that they're doing it in other places in the world. And it's kind of just like another tool for the tool belt, the way I think about it. So the broader your experiences are in grape growing, the more sort of options you have. And it's the same thing with winemaking. I mean, I'm not making a Sirtico or Nerello Cappuccio, but we're all making wine. And so when I go over there and I'm meeting with winemakers, we're talking about technical things. We're talking about yeast varieties. We're talking about fermentation temperature and oak selection. And so a lot of those things are really relevant to what we're doing here in the winery.
Anything you saw there reinforced what you're doing here?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like anytime I go to a place, I always try to visit the extremes. Like I try to visit the most hippie, biodynamic producers, and then I try to visit the most commercially successful, sort of progressive producers, because I always find that like we're somewhere in the middle. But if I'm going to people that are in the middle, I'm not getting new ideas. You have to kind of explore the fringes to understand what's out there in terms of ideas. And so really even just talking philosophy about winemaking or wine or grape growing with other growers, I don't want to say it's inspiring, but it inspires you to think in different ways and kind of open your eyes to different thought processes.
Anything really blow you away about Sicily or about Greece?
The wine and food.
And that's the thing too. So this is something I know you do. I mean, in Europe, it's a given. The wine is being made to go with food.
For sure.
And that's your focus. It's not necessarily an American winemaking focus throughout the entire industry, state by state.
Yeah, and even more so than that, it's the wine that they're growing is made for the food that they're growing. It's not like they're just making food-friendly wines. They're making a Sirtico because it's delicious with sardines. You know what I mean? And so they're making
what grows
things
together goes together.
Exactly.
And it's not even a theme. It's just
life.
Centuries of life.
It's just life. So they have that concept down, and so I do try to expose myself to that. And so when I go somewhere and travel and have the opportunity to taste stuff like that, I try to sort of weave it into the bigger thought process of how do these people live? How do they? What's important to them? The cool thing about our industry is people like roll out the red carpet for you.
It's a social business.
It's a social business, but there's also like a mutual respect between people in this industry. So I can call a place like Sicily where I know nobody and set up a couple meetings, and they'll spend the whole morning with you. They'll cook us lunch. They'll take us out in the vineyards, tours like this. So you get an experience. Oh, they're amazing. That Nerosso is amazing, and the Sirtico from Santorini was equally as unbelievable.
Yeah, I think you nailed two great wines that really typify place. And as much as any wines out there in the world.
Well, the interesting thing that I thought was, I mean, they've been growing those grapes there for literally 1,000 years, same varieties in the same places, and really, both of those regions haven't kind of come to the forefront until the last 10 years or 20 years.
And they've really burst out. And there's some great deals too. Because
the value's unbelievable, but it's cool to see an old wine region sort of re-emerging, because I feel like there's some parallels to what's happening here. We're a new wine region, but we're emerging, and so we had a lot of the same challenges in terms of marketing. And so we had a lot of stuff that we were talking about that we couldn't be further apart from each other, but we had a lot of the same challenges, I guess.
I used a Greek wine at an event a few years back, and someone looked at me and they said, Greek wine? And I said, I don't know. They've been making it for thousands of years.
Yeah.
Some of them do have it down pat by now.
Yeah, exactly. It's not all Retsina.
That's right. Pretty cool. Last question. Why do you do what you do?
Well, that's a good question. That's
look,
deep.
There's a lot of people. I know. I like to. Sometimes we want to go a little deep, but it's. But you know, people. There's people are envious of what you do.
Yeah.
One of the things we've been pointing out these past 6 months is that it's not all glitz and glamour.
Sure.
In fact, most of it's
that's
not.
hard work, definitely.
But why do you do what you do? You could have done a lot of other things.
Yeah, I could have, definitely. I think I knew from an early age I was not an office person. Like sitting at a computer desk 9 to 5 just that has no appeal to me. So I didn't want to do that. I grew up in an agricultural family, so like farming something from the land always had an appeal to me. We grew up making wine, so we were home winemakers.
Right. Home winemakers, but
yes,
doing
a
different
barrel
kind of
to your old school Italian, wine. And so my experience from wine from an early age was really positive. And I think it kind of just came together where we had this piece of land that we really weren't growing anything on. We were using a part of it for our garden center business, and had the opportunity to basically figure out what to grow here, and grapes made sense. It's a really good spot for grapes because of our hillsides and everything. And it kind of just came together. And I think my experience with wine in college, especially once I started learning about it, and you know this still, the more you learn about it, you just go down the rabbit hole, and it's like you just get more and more into it, and it's something that people that are in the wine industry for 50 years are still learning every day. That's really important to me, because I have a yearning for learning. Like, I like to learn new things and experience new things. So this is kind of an industry where you can continue to do that your whole life and have new experiences, and it's fun. It's a tangible thing for me, right? Like, so when you were here 2 months ago, the environment's totally changed.
Absolutely.
And so for me, it's a really seasonal thing, and you kind of get tied into the natural rhythm of things in this job, which I love. I love being outside.
And you feel the rhythm now. You know, it's like a golf swing or playing basketball, right? You get the stroke, you get the right movement. It's different, but it's repetitive. It's familiar, but it's new, and so. But you've been at it now for a good handful of seasons.
Yeah, 10 years.
So you've got a rhythm now.
Yeah, and I remember like my first year, I wrote everything down. Like, I probably spent an hour at the end of every day, like writing everything down. And now so much of that stuff is
someday will be donated to the Cornell Agricultural School.
No, but I mean, now some of it's so intuitive, because we've done it 10 times. We just know, and my crew does too. They know they're coming
kind of
out.
muscle memory.
Yes.
Hey, buddy.
So yeah, it gets a little easier every year, but it's still different enough where we have challenges every year, and we have new things, and kind of keeps us on our toes. So. It's been fun.
All right. Michael, thanks a lot for having us here.
Thanks for coming.
Appreciate it, and taking some time out. Bright and early this morning, and it's starting to get bright now, which is great, right? It's hopefully the season really starts to take shape.
Right.
Pretty nice. This is Hank Zona of the Grapes Unwrapped with Mike Beneduce of Beneduce Vineyards. We'll see you again soon, and as we continue our series here of a year in a winery and a year in the vineyard, and it's pretty interesting. People are enjoying it, I think, who are watching it, and it's I think we're succeeding in showing people that it's not all glitz and glamour, but it's actually pretty cool stuff that's happening.
Definitely.
See you again next time.
Thanks.
again, everybody. It's Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped. I'm here at Beneduce Vineyards. It's late September. It's crunch time. It's harvest time, and it's a challenging year because there's been rain. There hasn't been as much kind of late season heat, and so they're really fast and furiously out here. It's not a lot of time for idle chit chat and kind of harvesting the grapes, trying to get them in before the next rainfall. I've got a basket here of these gorgeous Blaufränkisch grapes. And they've been at it now for a few weeks, and they'll keep going up until October. So we're going to spend some time here just seeing what's happening with harvest. Like I said, it's not a good time to stand around and talk idly with people. They're really cruising here to get these grapes in. And we're going to spend some time with Mike as he's pressing some of the grapes inside. If you go to every aisle on this block, there's at least one person here picking grapes. Over here is Jen. Jen's not in the tasting room today. She manages the tasting room, but it's all hands on deck this year and this time of year. So we're going to go over, just take a quick look at what she's doing. Hello, Ophelia. Ophelia's here watching over things. Hi, Jen. We don't want to cut in too much on your efficiency here.
How are you?
Good to see you again.
Nice to see you.
You usually see you behind the bar in the tasting room, but like I said, everyone's pitching in these days, aren't they?
Absolutely. All hands on deck for harvest.
And especially this year, right? Because with the weather, it's been kind of a race against time for
It
a lot of
has.
the different grapes as they've been ready.
Absolutely.
So-
A little bit wet here, but you know, when you gotta get them in, the grapes will tell you when to come in.
Yeah, and they do look beautiful. They really do.
They do. There's some really beautiful colors.
So what's really obvious is that Jen's doing this all by hand. And folks, if you want to understand why wine costs what it does, well, everything here is picked by hand. Everything here is done by hand. So and the nice thing is, not only is she just picking these clusters, but if they're grapes that aren't that good, they're taking them right off right here. So you're almost doing like a field sort, if you will, right? And
Absolutely. You have to sort everything, make sure they're a really nice color, that they're not too light or red, which means they're going to be a little bit sour. So you want to make sure the color is really consistent. And when in doubt, you can always taste them. If they taste good, it's going to make good wine.
And if they're not good, you're just dropping them right back into the soil, right? So
Absolutely.
It's the next level of compost.
Absolutely. You want to put those nutrients back into the soil so for next year.
So this is pretty crazy. I'll ask you a question. As the tasting room manager, you guys are harvesting 7 days a week, but when the tasting room's open, people are still coming in. So it's really...
They are, and it's great for them to see the process. It gets them more integrated into the wine that they're drinking when they see them being processed like right behind them in the bar, and then we get to explain what's going on because Mike has taught us every little step in between.
That's pretty cool.
It is.
It really is. I'm going to let you get back to work.
Thank you very much.
You've been out here since what time?
I got here a little after 9.
Oh, so you're kind of slacking today, aren't you?
Well, I had to take care of some things this morning.
Yeah, I was going to
so.
say. And you're sitting here, you've been here for a few hours now. It's almost lunchtime, and you guys will be here until dark probably, right?
Until we're done.
All right. Enjoy your Advil later.
Thank you very much.
I don't want to stop Jen's flow here, so let's go inside. And because you really do get a rhythm going, you can see when you work these lines. It's it's they're moving. They've got their method down. Let's go inside and see what Mike's doing. They stick a little bit, don't they? This is why your wine costs what it does when everything is done by hand, the way it ought to be done.
Artisanal.
So this keeps at this constant speed, pretty much.
Yep,
And then, so it basically does what it's supposed to do for the couple of hours.
Pretty much. Well, this will roll like this now. We've got it. I can feel they're kind of evenly distributed around that.
You get a sense of it.
Stop it spinning.
Gotcha.
So basically, this is a bladder press. So it's a bladder that's running down the center of the cylinder. We just loaded the grapes in here. kind of rotate this to get the grapes evenly distributed around that bladder because we want to press a small amount of grapes. And then once we have that distributed, we start to inflate that bladder with air. So you can imagine it's kind of tight like a balloon. It's blowing up a balloon. It's inflating, and it's pushing those grapes up against the side of this cage. And so as it's squeezing those, the juice is dropping down into the pan underneath us.
And it's gentle. You're not blasting these. You're not like it's not like you're putting these in a food processor.
No,
this is a real gentle press.
Very slow and gentle. So we're starting at about 2 psi. So the pressure in your car tire is maybe 35 or 40 psi.
Basketball's about 15, so this ball's not bouncing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we're going to go at 2 psi, and then we're going to deflate the bladder, rotate it again to kind of fluff up the grapes, and then we'll go up to maybe 3 psi. And again, 4 psi. We'll do that about 10 or 12 times until we get up to maybe 15 or 20 psi total, and then we'll stop. And we'll make what we call press cut. We'll separate that out.
So this will take about 2 hours.
Take about 2 hours.
And at the end of 2 hours, we'll see what's left.
Exactly.
And it's pretty interesting. And now the really cool thing about this, and you did this by design when you built this place, was your tasting room is just a few feet over here to the left.
Absolutely.
So people come in, and this is the busy season. So people are, they're back from vacation, they're whatever they're doing with their kids in the summer. So the weekends in the summer are probably, in the fall are probably pretty busy.
It's funny because we're busiest in the production and we're busiest in the tasting room. It hits us like from both ends.
It's a buzz. It's a real buzz of activity. So not the bees. And so people are standing here, drinking what's been produced here in the past year or two, and watching what they're going to be drinking hopefully here in the next year or two.
And then taste the juice out of the pan, and taste the fermenting on the tanks and stuff. So it's fun. There's always something going on this time.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you.
Want to taste this?
Yeah, I'd love to.
All right.
So you're pulling off some
I'm gonna pull
first run
fresh juice here. So excuse the dirty glass because I'm going in it all day.
That's quite all right.
But you can see it's just kind of nice, cloudy juice.
So what can you tell from tasting and looking at that juice after you?
Well, we're looking at one is how much it's oxidizing. So we don't want the juice typically to be too brown when it's in the press pan. So we'll try to keep this kind of pumping as we're going. And then basically so the press pan is empty. The other thing we're really looking for when we're pressing is the levels of acidity and the levels of tannins. So when you start like this, when we're just doing a light pressing, you have a lot of acidity.
Yep.
Because that's in the juice, kind of the heart of the grape. So you're just taking the light juice.
Yep.
And you have very little tannin because you're not really pressing the skins at that point yet.
It's in there though.
Yeah, you can feel a little bit, And as we get deeper into the press cycle, that'll shift. You'll have less acidity and more tannins. And so we need to decide when we want to kind of cut that off.
So you're tasting constantly.
Every cycle.
Here's where the science and the art comes in, right? I mean, you're measuring things. You're in the lab and measuring things. You're testing. You're checking the weather constantly. But then you're actually, a lot of your decisions are based on the actual taste itself.
Yeah. If you're having a bad taste day, like I can't drink coffee in the morning. If I burn my tongue, my whole day could be shot. I have to make decisions on the fly, and so you do have to use a lot of your senses throughout the process. So we just finished our press cycle here.
It's like something out of science fiction.
This press is older than me. It says made in Western Germany on it.
Oh wow!
That gives you an idea.
Wow.
This is an old Bill's presser. Fits about 2,000 pounds of grapes.
But it makes it a lot easier than that hand press you were using a few
we
years
have
back.
graduated from the basket press. Thank God. But you can see here with the website. The pumice bin is underneath there. We're going to spin this over and drop all the pumice right down underneath.
And the pumice is what's left over, the skins, the seeds, the stems, whatever. It's not a lot because everything's hand-picked.
Exactly.
So it's just pretty clean. And then you're going to take that and that's going back in.
Actually, we're going to compost this first for about 2 years.
All right.
And then it'll bring down, and then we'll spread it back out in the field once we get into the winter.
So nothing goes to waste.
No, absolutely. it's mainly the stems.
Yep.
So we do what's called whole cluster pressing.
Yep.
The whole clusters of grapes, load them right into the press, and very gently pressing. But you can see how the stems are still intact.
Yeah.
They haven't been pinched or mangled at all. And so this is a really gentle extraction method, so you don't get a lot of that green flavor from the stems.
Right.
Whereas a lot of wineries, like a big production winery, they're going to de-stem first. They're going to de-stem and crush the grapes because then they can fit twice as much in the press, saving a lot of time.
Right.
But when you're doing that, you're pinching the seeds, you're pinching the stems, and
Which is adding some bitterness to
yeah,
the wine.
it's like a green banana peel.
Right. So
That's gonna end up in
and this is green. So yeah, right. So you're by using the whole cluster and doing it gently, you're actually extracting more flavor than
Yeah, you're extracting much better quality juice and just a little bit less of it. And then you can see how the skins, there's really not much juice left in the skins.
Yeah.
And there's no seeds in there. The seeds are still intact, so we haven't pinched any of those. And so now we're just going to put this on the compost pile, let it break down for the next 2 years.
It'll take 2 years to break
Yeah,
down.
pretty much. We flip the pile a couple times a year.
Okay. It's a bee farm now.
Yeah, exactly. Hope you're not allergic.
No.
So then these guys... Go ahead.
I know it's just crunch time, and especially this year, it's a crazy year. Everything almost feels more compressed than ever. So I appreciate you taking a little bit of time out here. I know it's not the most easy time to do this, but thank you, because this is, it's good for people to see, again, what goes into that glass of wine they have, that bottle of wine they have. And so thanks for carving some time out.
Thanks for coming
Appreciate
out.
it. We'll see you again soon. All right? Take care. This is Hank Zona of the Grapes Unwrapped, Mike Beneduce at Beneduce Vineyards. It's crunch time, folks. It's harvest. So
Get back to work.
Get back at it. Okay. We'll catch you again next time. Hey again, everybody. This is Hank Zona of the Grapes Unwrapped. I'm back at Beneduce Vineyards with Mike Beneduce. Mike, thanks for having us back.
Thanks for coming.
This is kind of, I don't want to say it's the end of the line, because one of the things we've talked about all year long is that the work is never done.
Yeah, right.
But it's the end of an important aspect of the line,
Definitely.
so to speak, right?
End of the cycle.
End of the cycle, and that is
Harvest. So
Harvest.
we just finished picking all our grapes yesterday.
everything's in.
Everything's in. We're getting a nor'easter this weekend, so we want to make sure
You really want to get
we got
it in.
everything in for the weekend.
Yeah.
This is Blaufränkisch that we're crushing today.
Yeah,
so
that's beautiful. Really,
we
it's
picked them
beautiful.
yesterday. We put them in a cooler to chill everything down overnight. And now we're gonna go into this machine, which is our de-stemmer crusher.
Mm-hmm.
It does exactly what it sounds like. It separates the berries from the stems, so you can see how there's kind of a stem in between,
Yeah.
and that's green and bitter. So we don't want that in the wine. So this machine is going to basically knock the berries off the stems. The stems will shoot out into our garbage can, which end up in our compost.
Yep.
And then the berries will drop into that bin below. And we just do a very light crush, so basically just opening up the berry like that.
Just to get the juice to be able to start to run out.
and then basically the yeast finds its way inside the berry and ferments it from the inside out. And then it breaks it open and kind of finishes it up.
As we've seen throughout the year, even starting in January, everything here is done by hand. And so these were picked by hand, field sorted by hand, and you're going to continue to sort them to make sure you get the best quality grapes in there, right?
Yeah, we're
So-
actually doing a triple sorting this year. So
Triple sorting.
It's been a rough vintage because of so much rain in August and September.
Right.
And so we want to make sure that anything that's ending up in our wine is perfect looking fruit like this is. So we do the first hand harvest field sorting in the vineyard. So basically any cluster that doesn't look good, they're going to pick it and throw it right on the ground so that it composts itself back in. What they think is good is ending up in these lugs behind us. Next step is for us to dump into the hopper. I'm going to be doing the physical sorting on the hopper, so anything I don't like, just underripe, or maybe there's some botrytis or something, we're going to sort that out, or any leaves that made it through, we'll sort that out. And then we have some staff that's going to actually be picking at any little small bits of stems that make it through. We'll pull that down as well.
A leaf here and there and stuff like that, because
Yep.
that will impact the flavor, especially in a year like this where you didn't get as much ripeness because of the weather. So you really want to make sure that that's not in the flavor profile.
Yeah.
Right?
So even though the stems typically are not ending up in the wine, all those components, even the little bits and pieces of them can influence the flavor of it. So we want to make sure we basically start with the best we can.
And as we know, those big mass producers aren't doing, they're not doing triple sorting, they're not even doing sorting really. Everything just kind of goes into the hopper and then through the magic of chemicals and science, they make something that sort of is like a food processed version of wine.
The main difference, or one of the main differences between a commercial producer and a small or artisanal producer is whether or not they hand harvest.
Right.
So we're
I
literally
agree.
picking every cluster by hand, and humans are touching it and deciding whether or not it's worthy. Most big producers are using machine harvesters, which
Right.
is just a tractor that goes over the entire row, shakes the crap out of the canopy, and all the clusters and leaves
Sucks
and whatever
everything up.
else ends up in the
Right.
bins, and they're just using that. So
Right.
you know, it's
Twigs, bugs, rocks,
Snakes. I've seen it all.
critters. They all go in there, and of course, in their process, they'll all get scrubbed
Yeah,
clean.
right.
You know, but here, this is much different process,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
and a better process. I mean, I don't care what anybody says. It's just a better process, and that's why your wines are good.
Appreciate
so really good. So
Yeah.
great. Let's see how this works.
yeah.
Right?
Let's check it out.
Okay. I'm sitting here on top of the world. This is on top of the red wine making world, isn't
Yeah,
it?
right, exactly.
This is the start of the next process here.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to say one of the interesting things about this vantage point, and Mike and I have talked about this not just this year on video, but for years, is how much cleaning goes on and how much handwork goes into this. And just from here, I could see everything's getting cleaned and sprayed down already, and
Yeah.
it's a critical part of the process.
Yeah, I mean, we sanitize these machines before and after every
Right.
time we use them. So
Yeah.
this, the beginning of the day started sparklingly clean.
Yeah.
And then, you know, as soon as we're emptying the lugs, we got somebody washing them down already, because if they dry, it's much harder to clean them. It's like
Right,
juice.
right.
It's juice. So we try to get them when they're wet, kind of.
Yeah.
So what we're going to do now is going to start handing the lugs up to you.
Okay.
We'll put them inside this hopper, and I'll just kind of explain how this machine works.
Okay.
All right, so this is our destemmer crusher. So basically we're putting a lug of grapes in there. This auger turns, and it's basically a big screw that moves the grapes towards this opening here. And then just watch your mic there. This is what the inside of it looks like.
Wow.
Well, obviously we've been crushing grapes today, but
That's
the grapes
right.
fall down in here. These paddles spin, and they knock the berries off of the clusters.
Wow.
And then it's also another screw, and so it moves the clusters this way. And as this thing turns, the berries fall through here, and the stems are too big to fall through the holes, so they get trapped.
And they get shot out
And then
the
they
side
basically
there.
get shot out the side. So we're separating the stems from the berries, which fall down.
And
in
they're
between.
going in the bin, and they're going to be composted. It takes a couple of years to compost those,
Yeah,
right?
we compost for 2 years usually.
Now, one of the things that was interesting watching the last swing here, where you were dumping the grapes in. You know, you and your team here, it's like a dance company.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is amazingly coordinated. Everybody's kind of moving in concert. You
Yeah.
really, a big part of this is getting a flow, isn't it?
Definitely. And
Right.
you know, anytime you make a change to the team, you feel it, because they're out of step with everybody.
Somebody new in the dance company, right?
Yeah.
Yes. From the very first shoot we did in January on that 14-degree day, when you're pruning out there, you know, what I like to say to people, and the point we want to make is that your wines, any wine, good wine, costs a certain amount when you're doing all this by hand.
Yeah.
And-
Labor's the main factor. In
Right,
wine
and it's
costs.
not just labor, it's labor with care.
Yeah,
It's
love.
not just work, it's love, and you're taking care, and you don't have to triple sort if you're a winery, but if you're a Beneduce winery, you do have to triple
I
sort.
think it's a pride thing too. We just have too much pride in the wines that we're showing to people, so
Right.
we want to do every possible step we can to make it the best we can.
Okay, so we went through the destemmer.
Yep.
Got that nice gentle squeeze going on these, and we've got the bins, and there's plenty of them. What do we have here? What's going to happen to this?
So this is about 1,800 pounds of grapes. This will end up making about 700 bottles of wine, this individual
Okay.
bins. You can see how many bins we're working with.
Yeah.
So once we kind of crush up the berries, the juice gets released,
Mm-hmm.
and we can ferment this either with wild yeast, so whatever was on the grapes out
Mm-hmm.
in the vineyard, or we can add a commercial yeast that we select for certain characteristics. So
Okay.
maybe it's, you know, a really clean fermenter or a fast fermenter or whatever. We use about 20 different strains of yeast in here, including some wild fermentations.
Wow.
So this is crushed up grapes. We add about maybe a quarter cup of yeast to this whole thing, so it's a very tiny amount. And then the yeast are actually a lot like us. They breathe in oxygen and they breathe out CO2. So one of the reasons we do open fermentation is so that it's giving the yeast plenty of oxygen. So they're breathing in oxygen, they're breathing out CO2, and those CO2 bubbles get sort of trapped underneath the skins.
Right.
And they make those skins float to the surface. We want the skins to be in contact with the juice underneath it,
Right.
because the juice is basically pulling the color and the tannin and a lot of the
It's
flavor.
really, right, exactly.
So we want to make sure that all these skins stay wet, basically. So twice a day we do what's called punch downs. We do it with this punch down tool, which is just a stainless steel tool.
It's part of the Beneduce workout plan, isn't it?
And so we punch those skins.
It's the cap. Right?
You're punching the cap.
It's the cap.
Exactly.
So just so people know the lingo.
Yes.
And so you're getting it back down where you're getting the benefit of it.
Right, so you can see right underneath the surface is all that wine that's fermenting, and you can see all the bubbles.
Just gorgeous, yeah.
So that's all CO2 bubbles. And these have been fermenting for about 6 days.
Wow, it smells great.
Yeah, it's really fruity at this point.
Yeah.
And so we're tasting these every day, checking the temperature of the fermentation, checking the amount of sugar.
Right,
that's how we're
because these
monitoring
things
it.
can heat up pretty quick, right?
Yeah, they can get, they'll peak in like the mid 80s, just naturally because the yeast has so much activity.
Yep.
And then, we're doing this twice a day. So typically first thing in the morning and last thing before we go home at night, so that it's kind of spread out. And then tasting these every day. And so eventually we'll start to decide that we've extracted enough from the skins. The color and the tannin is kind of where we want it. And then we'll press it. So we'll send this whole bin. We actually have like a forklift that picks these bins up and dumps it directly into our press.
Okay. The same press that you're using for the whites.
Same press we use on the whites, yep. And so then we're basically pressing the rest of the wine out of the skins, separating the solids, again, back into the compost pile. And the wine itself will get pumped into oak barrels for aging. And that whole process takes about 2 years and then another year of aging in the bottle. So we'll be drinking this in about 3 years. Gotta be patient.
Yeah, we've talked about that in other videos. It's a long game, isn't it?
Yes, for sure.
Even when we did the video where you were planting, the new vines, that was a number of years in the making before you even hit them into the ground, and now it'll be a number of years before they yield something that's workable. So it's a stretch. This is, and you said it's going to be roughly 2 weeks, and it's not 2 weeks on the nose. It's really, again, it's a combination of science and art.
Yes.
It's taste, it's smell, it's sight, but it's also analysis as well.
Yep, all those things. Definitely a good blend. We're doing the monitoring, doing the analysis in the lab, but in the end, the wine glass is our best tool we have in here.
Smells great.
Yeah.
Smells great. Fantastic.
Thanks,
Mike. So it's the end of this aspect of the cycle, the growing cycle, right? I mean, this is it. There's nothing left on the vines. I mean, here or there you might find a grape here and there, but everything is picked and you're in the final throes.
Pretty much. Yeah, I always feel like it feels so lonely out here because like for the last 3 months we've been staring at grapes on the vine, and then you come out one day and it's just like empty.
Because you're here every day, it must seem noticeable.
It does.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. It gets a little, I don't want to say depressing, but you definitely go through some emotions when you see a vine like this that you've taken 12 months to grow to that, and ripen the fruit and everything, and then it's totally different. But if you're a farmer, you're just so naturally connected to those cycles, and it's just part of your year. Like, this is the year I got married, and this is what the weather was like, you know what I mean? And so there's different connections you make in your life.
And this year's child was kind of problematic.
This year was a problem child.
It's a little bit of a problem child, right? But you're getting it all straightened out now.
Well, like a problem child, it just needs extra attention, I think. And so that's what we're doing in the winery, is we're sort of putting extra work in the winery, making sure everything is sorted, making sure that we're really on top of the fermentations to make sure that we get clean flavors and all that. And so, it just requires a little extra attention. A year like last year was such a beautiful vintage that
was a perfect child.
It was a perfect child. It was like a straight-A student out of the womb, So it was a lot less work for us.
Just get into Cornell.
Exactly. Yeah. Hopefully, rooting for it. But I mean that's part of it, and it makes you appreciate both vintages when you go through the cycle like that.
Right.
I think when you're in an area that doesn't have a lot of vintage variation, you don't always appreciate that, and it doesn't show in the wines. The other thing that's interesting for me is that these wines will taste different than last year's wines because the weather was different. We want to tell that story in the wines. We don't want the wines to be the same every year. Right.
You're not doing this. This is not a major science project where you're trying to get the same consistency of product every year like the mass producers do.
Yeah. No,
it doesn't matter what the year is, because their wine's always going to taste the same, and because of that, it's often going to be lacking in real character.
I think so too. I mean, we want consistently high quality wines, but we want them to tell the story of that vintage and everything that came with it.
But you know what? You got married this year, right in the middle of that cycle, and that'll be reflected in your wine.
Yes.
It will be. It will be.
it's a big thing to go through in life,
Yeah,
and it's
for
a
sure.
great thing to go through. So,
Yeah.
so you know, even though the season was a problem child, if you will, it was a great year for you too.
Absolutely. Was. Yeah, overall.
Yeah. So, but the cycle may be over now. The grapes are all picked. I mean, it's kind of interesting too. I don't think people realize it, but just like a tree, the leaves do change. You know, they
Yeah.
change color and all, and
Start to
different grapes actually change in color too, right?
Absolutely,
And,
yeah. Some of them are really red, some
yeah.
get orange. These just got hit with frost a couple days ago, so you
Yeah.
can see how they're kind of starting to die. And then, like you said, just like a maple tree, they'll drop down. And we're basically in the winery for the next month and a
Well, I
half.
was gonna say your focus really is now there, but then at some point you have to start turning your back here, right?
And there's plenty of work to do out here. We're pounding posts for new plantings in the spring, so we'll start doing that next week and kind of straightening up the wires and rolling up the nets and all that stuff. So there's still work to do out here.
Yeah. You're not laying back.
No, right, exactly. And then we'll start our pruning in basically late December, early January.
So we just want to make sure that there's no seeds in your teeth. But you just said that you're eating grapes all day long, and it's not because you're eating. You're constantly tasting and testing, right? Because that's as scientific as the process is. There's the art of it, and taste is often an art and a focus or attention.
Definitely. Yeah, I mean, every row is different almost. So even within a block, the top of this block gets a little bit more water than the bottom of the block. The grapes actually taste different, even within a 1 acre block. So every time there's fruit coming in the winery, I'm constantly tasting, making notes of how thick the skins are, how ripe the seeds are, what does the juice taste like, what does the color of the juice look like, and we're actually changing our winemaking practices to suit whatever that information is coming into us.
Yeah.
So it's a constant thing where you're tasting all day.
Yeah, and one of the things I often say too, once I got a real interest in wine, it actually helped me to stop and slow down and consider not just what I was drinking, not just the wine, but any food that you have too.
Yeah,
and I'm sure you do the same thing too. You're not like sitting at a meal and over-analyzing it and being all kinds of like humpy in front of everybody. But at the same time, because it's what you do, because it's the way you're now trained.
Definitely.
You stop and consider.
Yeah, you
what
taste
have
something
and
and you're
what the
like,
taste
oh, do I
is.
like this? Do I not like this?
Yeah.
Why?
Yeah.
Not just is this good or not, but like, is it too salty? Is it too sweet? Is there not enough acidity or whatever? You definitely start to taste everything differently and smell things differently.
Yeah,
I'm in the grocery store like smelling orange peels.
I've seen you
stuff.
do that too. I've seen you in the grocery store do it. I bumped into you.
Yeah.
But it's interesting because, unfortunately, in American culture, we a lot of times eat and drink mindlessly.
Yeah, I think
people
so.
stand at a counter, or they just, they want something that's cold and refreshing without any impact on, or thought to what the taste of it may actually be. But it's kind of nice to actually stop and.
Yeah, I think that's
consider
changing.
it.
I think people are starting to care what they eat. I mean, it's such a big part of our heritage, or our culture, and so people are starting to kind of catch on to that.
And it's interesting, though, it's funny you say what they eat, because I do think people are much more focused on the food they're putting in their mouth, more so, I think, than the beverage. They're starting to catch up with the beverages and their interest in that, too.
I agree.
And I think that benefits you, who is doing this on a local and artisan level, that people are hopefully going to start seeking that out.
Yeah,
much more.
It's a food product. Wine is a food product. It happens to be liquid, but it's still a food. It still has to be grown somewhere, and all of those things influence the flavors, and so.
You're right, it is a food product, and that's why I often say that those mass-produced wines are food processed.
Right.
And because they actually are. And one of the questions I pose to people is I'll ask people, who here eats Wonder Bread? And no one in a room will raise their hand or admit to it, right? But then I say, then why would you drink the wine equivalent of a Wonder Bread?
Yeah.
And people are like, oh yeah, you're kind of right about that.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so there's no Wonder Bread here.
No, this is like that hand-kneaded sourdough.
That's right. Truly hand-kneaded.
Yes.
So, good. So Mike, thank you. Thanks again for having us out. It's been an interesting year. I know people who watch these videos have found it really interesting. I know the year's not over too, and there's even more aspects of this process of a vineyard and a winery that we should probably pick up and cover at some point soon.
Definitely.
But it's been interesting at this juncture, at this end of the cycle of the year.
Yeah.
And even it's not even a year, right? The 1 year goes and bleeds into the next. So thanks for having us out again and making time out of a really, I know, busy and crazy time of year. So
no worries.
This is Hank Zona, the Grapes Unwrapped, with Mike Beneduce of Beneduce Vineyards. We'll catch you again next time.